What is art?
Well, that's a hard one. What is art? Man, you better give me some time to think about that.
Well, you answered it the other day.
What did I say?
I can't remember.
It wasn't that good, was it?
It was good.
Well, I think art is an expression of an individual's dreams and hopes and all that. It's a visual representation of what a person thinks about and dreams about and hopes for. And that's kind of what it is, but you know, I get ideas in my head because I think of stuff that I could do that I would like to do, but I can't do all of them. I don't have that much time. I figure when I get to heaven that that's probably what I'll be doing. I'll have an eternity to do all those things. Everybody in the family was an artist of some sort. I was real close to my grandmother and her sisters. One of them became an illustrator and moved to New York, and she did a lot of fashion illustrations and that sort of thing. Aunt Frances. And then there was Aunt Allie she was a writer. And then my Big Auntie she was a seamstress, and she did all kinds of work for my granddad, who was a ladies' tailor. My mother was an artist too. She was an amateur. She did watercolors of these 1920s ladies. Eventually moved to Corpus Christi. Was lucky enough to find an art teacher, and her name was Ms. Thompson. I'll never forget her, and she was so encouraging to us. And then my dad opened a music store with his dad. Well, there was a guy came in the store one time, and he'd been living in Europe, and he said, you know, I have a whole bunch of European paintings that would look really pretty in here with these pianos. And he put like 15 or 20 paintings around on the walls. Well, I'd never seen that kind of art in my life. And I can remember going around and I'd get up there and look at those things real close. And I would think, how in the world can anybody do that? It just seems impossible. Talked my mother into buying me a little set of oil paints, which was very frustrating because I didn't know how to do that. I was just a pencil drawer. I didn't know about how to do anything with oil paints, but I struggled with that for a while, and once we moved up to the farm, kept using those little oils, and I got a little bit better where I could use them a little better, and I started painting some, you know, cowboys at the time. I realized pretty quickly that painting horses is not as easy as it looks, and so I practiced long and hard at that. My dad had a friend who was that had worked there at North American. I told him I was a technical illustrator, and he said, well, my little brother is in California. He's an illustrator, and he said, you need to meet him. And his name was Guy Deal. He was a pretty well-known illustrator at the time, and I showed him what I was doing, and he said, well, you need to come to Art Center in L.A. He said, if you come out there, he said, you'll be able to make you a good living doing that. So Brenda and I got married one week and left the next week for Art Center. I was a country boy, and Brenda was a country girl, and we went into L.A., and we didn't even know where we were going to live, so we were going down Wilshire and said, well, this is a nice street. We'll just rent something here on Wilshire. Most expensive real estate in the world. We rented an apartment on Wilshire, believe it or not. And it was expensive, but we thought, well, we got to live somewhere. I consider Guy the most important art teacher because I'll never forget the first class I had out there with him. We were doing figures, and he sat me down, and we all had these drawing boards where they would sit around and we'd start our paintings. He said, have you got a pencil? And I said, yeah, here's my pencil. He went in, and on my drawing board, he drew a human skull, just beautiful, beautiful drawing of it. He said, always remember that when you're doing a portrait or doing a person, because underneath all that skin and muscle and stuff, that skull is always going to be there. And I'll never forget that. Everything I know about art I learned in that school, I can guarantee you. I'd have to say when the computers came in, because once that happened, I had to do something else. I couldn't make a living doing illustrations anymore, and it made me free to go ahead and do the paintings that I'd always wanted to do. And then I found that gallery in Santa Fe, which was, I didn't know it at the time, but it was probably one of the best in the country. And she got a lot of good sales, which made me realize this is doable. It's possible to do this and make a living. From that point in time, I kind of did my own thing, and we got into some of these snobby art shows. I was in downtown Fort Worth. I went over to the Kimball Museum, and across the street there was a little gallery there that I went in, and it was owned by Melvin Warren. And his daughters were both there running the gallery. And I happened to see one of his paintings, which I was very impressed with. I thought it was the most beautiful painting I'd ever seen. And it had a really nice frame on it. And I just happened to casually ask Barbara, where does he get his frames? And she said, well, he gets them down at Clifton. That's where he lives. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, who's the framer? And she said, Joanne Spieler. She said, go down there and meet Joanne. I said, well, where in the heck is Clifton? I've never heard of it. And so Brenda and I came on I think a Saturday, and we met Joanne, and it was just like she was a relative. When we got up to leave to come home, she said, why don't y'all just spend the night? And she said, I've got an extra room, you can just stay here. From that little trip to Joanne's, that was a life changer. It really was. I'll tell you a story about Melvin Warren. He was my friend. I loved him dearly, and he was so kind, and he was very helpful to me. Mel and I decided we were in Italy, and we went down to Naples, and we decided we were going to go out on the boat docks and paint the boats out there in the harbor and all that. And we'd been painting for about an hour, and all of a sudden I heard this crash. And I looked around, and he had knocked his thing over, and all of his brushes and everything went through those cracks into the harbor. Just emptied it out. And he said, well, that does it. He said, I'm going to have to quit. He said, I'll have to go back to the hotel. I said, Mel, here, you can use any of mine you want. You still got your painting there. Well, it's my whole life nearly. It's been, I mean, I've gone places that I would have never gone if I hadn't been in art. I've met people that I would have never known. I've studied art all my life. I mean, it's just like, I hate to say it's like the Bible, but I've got volumes of books. I've got thousands of art books that I've bought, and I've studied art from every angle that you can study it from, and it's a world unto itself. It's enriched my life in knowing what other people have gone through to do art, all the way from poor old Vincent up to Michelangelo, who I consider the greatest talent who ever lived. And that's saying a lot. But as far as native talent, anybody that's 21 years old that could do that Pieta, where Mary's holding Jesus, that's a miracle. No, it's not humanly possible. Anyway, that's what's enriched my life, knowing where we came from.